Hi, I'm Aoifinn, and as we round to the end of 2024, we thought it would be a great idea to discuss some of the themes and just reflections on the 2024 50 Faces podcast. I'm delighted to be joined today by Jeanie Coomber, who was a previous guest on the podcast this year. She is an executive coach, a leadership content creator. Her coaching business is 20 years old this coming February, and her podcast, Warriors at Work, is 5 years old this coming March. Welcome, Jeanie. Thank you so much for coming here and turning
Thank you
the page.
so much. I love to reflect. I love to look back and figure out what has helped us to go forward. So looking forward to it.
Well, great. Well, I will turn it over to you. The topic of this, the idea of this podcast is to ask me a little bit about the reflections of 2024 through the lens that is most relevant to you and what interests you.
So what would be really interesting for me, Ethan, is for you to share when you started 2025, when you woke up, what was the paramount thought or feeling that you wanted to bring forward into the year?
For me, it was authenticity and honesty. Where I have seen the most positive feedback, whether in our gatherings that we now do as part of the 50 Faces podcast community, we've run some live events and we're starting to do more connection with our guests in real life. What I've seen the most refreshing aspect of that is our ability to challenge conventional thinking and to really tear down sacred cows. I'm going to mix a lot of metaphors here
Mm.
and discuss elephants in the room. So that has been, I think, kind of missing in some of the commercial gatherings that we see. They tend to be maybe with an agenda around marketing. There's a political correctness. There's a desire not to
Mm.
challenge authority and conventional wisdom. And we've got beyond that now. I think we all know what certain terms in investing mean. We all know what the industry stands for, but we often don't step back. And I think it's particularly important to step back with markets raging as they are right now in a positive way. This is the classic Warren Buffett, the tide is in. No one sees anyone swimming naked. So if there is someone with shortfalls right now, we're not seeing them. And in this very frothy environment, we sometimes forget to challenge them. So what I
Mhm.
found the best feedback was when we really are unhinged, well, not unhinged, but unvarnished in our ability to challenge authority and challenge conventional wisdom. So I look forward to doing more of that in 2025.
Well, one of the things that I love about the 50 Faces podcast and the work that you're doing in the world is that it feels real. It feels very authentic. It feels very much appropriate and applicable to whatever is happening in real life through the lens of a business professional or a sales professional or financial professional. But one of the things that you're brilliant at is teasing out the realness, teasing out the humanity around that. Like even just the references you just made, frothy, referencing Warren Buffett, like that's such beautiful visuals. And so when you think now about going into 2025 and some of the things that you just shared, what is going to be the feeling, narrative, or themes for your podcast that you feel like, okay, now I'm taking it to the next level?
A great question. One of the things, just in terms of an actual practical theme, we want to do is explore more neurodiversity. You said that we
Mm.
were focused on human side, and we certainly are. And the idea of diversity, meaning cognitive diversity, socioeconomic diversity, all kinds of diversity, we believe are critical to ensure that our industry is as rich as possible. And neurodiversity, certainly in terms of the skills that neurodiverse individuals bring to the table, I'd love to see more of that in the workplace and really explore how that can work because that is empowering for so many. So that's a kind of a practical theme. As far as a more perhaps nuanced theme, I'd like to see, first of all, me creating a comfort space for people to come back and repeat some of their
Mm.
conversations. Revisiting people. Now, this podcast is now coming up on 5 years old this in 2025, but like your milestone, actually, you got a few
Mm-hmm.
months ahead of me and actually coming back and revisiting, not just having this kind of a one trick pony conversation with someone, go back for some more richness, see how they've adapted, see if they've changed their view, see what's different. These repeated conversations are fantastic. We don't do 3 hour Joe Rogan style conversations, we do 40-minute conversations. But coming back 2, 3 years later, I think is a great way to really see how someone has matured, whether they've changed their mind and moved on. So that's something I look forward to doing more of. And again, just giving them the space, the guests the space to be authentic, to be comfortable with me, as an interviewer and to hear some fresh content because we do get a lot of canned and repeated content with sound bites.
Just to that point, the world is growing and evolving in an insane pace. Lots of sadness, lots of opportunity, so much richness in terms of story, not just in the financial markets, but in governance. When you look out on the horizon, like what are some of the things that you're interested in exploring for yourself? And then how do you see that playing out in the podcast?
What I would like to see more is finding common ground in some of the divisive areas that we see.
Mm.
Because I think we are on the brink of a much more divisive environment when it comes to even executing our investments. It seems that we have to be careful of the language we use, the labels we use. And I would like to get at, well, why do people maybe oppose certain labels? What
Yeah.
hang-ups or preconceptions are they bringing to that conversation? And can we be curious? I always like the adage to be curious, not judgmental. And
Mm.
being curious about that and just asking why. I think that's something I would like to understand because I think sometimes, again, it's that soundbite culture. It's, well, if it's labeled this, I must be opposed to it, and really get to what they're seeking to achieve. I also always, when it comes to any macro, say discussion in markets, etc., I always say, well, what's in it for me? How does this big thing affect my life and my investment portfolio? And if I'm an institution, affect my objectives and my mission. If we can get to drawing things down to tangible effects and not theoretical effects, I think that that's much more important. So I've done this with many podcasts. I say, well, how exactly does this work? How would you
Mm.
implement this strategy? So having a little bit more just the so what question, I think asking that and then trying to say, well, what's in it for me as the listener, as the agent of this corporation, and trying to get a little bit get out of the, I think, into the trees and out of the woods if we're going to just kind of turn
Mm.
that expression on its head.
You as I mentioned, you're very good at exploring different aspects and dimensions of people's story. What are you looking personally to bring to the podcast this coming year that maybe reveals or shows a part of yourself that could help inform those that are listening and following?
I think this format is a little bit a part of that. Some feedback I've heard is that in my typical podcast, 50 Faces, I would speak maybe for 10% of the time and the guest for 90. And I got a little bit of feedback that there was a desire to hear more from me. And my
Mm-hmm.
point of view, a little bit more, well, what do you think? Do you agree with that? Like, how do you find that this issue? So bringing a little bit more of me into the podcast, I've introduced my name into the podcast name. So it's 50 Faces Podcast by Aoifinn Devitt with Aoifinn Devitt, because I do think that a personal brand is becoming more and more
Mm-hmm.
of us was a litmus test of a podcast. And I want people to know that there is a standard that I will implement as a host that will ensure that I've curated these guests. I've looked at them for content and interest quality and that I'm bringing that to the table. They have my guarantee essentially that I have curated this
Mm.
for them. So, and then in terms of the content, bringing a little bit more of my opinion to bear. I've had some feedback that there be a desire to hear more, perhaps panel-like discussions, more just debate on the podcast, and that, of course, is the essence of nuance: is getting more debate and counter views. So I'm hoping to bring that. And I'm always open to ideas as to what topics are we missing? What are we not analyzing? And I'd love to get feedback on that.
So, digging into that a little bit more, what are the big questions that you're sitting with as we are now in the middle of the early part of January? What are you sitting with that you want to explore?
Great question. And just in one of the podcasts I featured last year was at the 100-year life. Aviva Wittenberg Cox, she spoke
Yeah.
about the third quarter of the life, the space between age 50 and 75, as being some of the most exciting, potentially productive, and that we have to rethink this section of our lives because it is no longer the final quarter, as maybe it would have been in the past with different life expectancies. So I turned 50 last year. I had two great celebrations to ring in the occasion. But I do think that I am now on the embarking on my third quarter. And I think for many of us and my peers, we need to know what this third quarter should look like.
Mm,
Of us who maybe don't see retirement in the near future, how can we make use of ourselves and our with our highest and best use, bring that wisdom to the table? How do we stay relevant? How do we reskill? How do we learn how to not really be in the weeds at times? How do we learn to manage and to delegate authority and to maybe to motivate the next generation? So I think a better analysis of that phase, which is, I think, fundamentally being reinvented for this
mm,
generation. I would like to see more of that. I also think we've really succumbed to conventional wisdom thinking, whether it be that we were all going to have a recession in 2024, which we did not. Now there seems to be quite a deliberate getting in line behind Maganomics and the new Trump administration. There seems to be consensus around the US dominating global markets and global stock markets. And I would like to question that conventional wisdom because it's too easy to get on that
mm.
bandwagon. So, really thinking about where is the opportunity that is perhaps beneath the headline?
Where is the opportunity beneath the headline? So you use the term relevant. How do you stay relevant? What are the things that you're watching, reading, absorbing, thinking about to make sure that you stay relevant?
Great. Again, I love to listen to podcasts. I listen to a wide range of podcasts, usually political, ones focused on the economy, and equally history podcasts, really anything that comes my way. Spanish language podcasts have been my recent passion. And I stay relevant through not being complacent about my skill set being sufficient. I will always be in training mode when it comes to communication skills, pushing the envelope. I launched something called the Markets Happy Hour podcast, which is a weekly discussion of markets. And again, it's relevance, that what's in it for me? How does this matter to individuals and investors? So I would say that all of that is my way to stay relevant, to stay fresh in terms of the content and to put myself in the arena. One thing, unfortunately, as you probably know, the more senior we get, the less feedback we get. So
Mm.
I do crave feedback. I don't get a lot of it. And I suppose putting yourself in the arena is one way to get that, positive and negative. So love to get more of that and stay relevant that way. But it is through, I believe, engaging and not being complacent that we can stay relevant today.
And so I love how you just articulated that, and what I want to do is just tease it out a bit in that that's a very thinking mind answer. You just gave me all the things that you're doing to make sure that thinking mind is engaged. What does Aoifinn do to stay relevant and attuned to her inner world or her inner voice or her higher voice? However you characterize a higher level being around you.
I would love to say I meditate every day. I do not, but I find ways to reflect, and that is for me through exercise, through running. I have often got a podcast playing on my ear, but more interesting recently, I've had deliberately had nothing. I actually put my headphones in and play nothing, and that's a little bit of way of silencing a little bit of the excess noise. But what I'm really doing is planning, thinking about the day, really decompressing a little bit through silence on my own company. One of the wonderful things about running is it does get you to be comfortable in your own company. There is no, there is can be quite a peaceful, solitary activity. You're
Mm.
competing against yourself. You're comfortable being alone in dark places at times if it's a winter morning, and that I think gives great empowering so that's how I'm connecting right now, trying to spend time eh, again just reflecting on this third quarter and what are some of the objectives that I'd like to achieve with that.
Do you believe in affirmations, mantras, things like that that you infuse into your day? And like, how does that play into how you philosophically, physically, emotionally, mentally approach your day?
I've just been reading actually that affirming one's values and stating the values, even for 5 minutes before, say, an interview, is a very effective way to express and embody those values when you go into that interview and know that stays true. That is a technique I think I'll like to employ more of because I haven't done
Mm,
it as intentionally. I do think that this weekly podcast I do is a way of affirming at least what I think about markets. Say, it's a way of crystallizing a point of view, and then I can rely on it. It's a shortcut. I can go back then to that shortcut and reflect on and restate that, and it's definitely a heuristic. But as far as the more holistic values, I think the skill I recently read about will be something I try to incorporate this year.
Was there a mantra or an affirmation coming into this conversation that you'd be willing to share?
It was around ensuring that the what I deliver is relevant to you and to your core area of interest.
Mm,
Because I love to take forward the connection that we built through the two
yeah.
podcasts that we did. And just that incredibly empowering warrior at work image. I still have this image in my mind of an actual warrior dressed for battle, going to work
Mm.
and kind of ready for, like a military strategist would be, ready for whatever can come her way.
Readiness is being the key word. And you know, the interesting thing too that I love about you is so that you have this incredible professional profile and all of your accomplishments. You're incredibly smart, savvy. You also balance it with a tremendous amount of warmth, relatability, thoughtfulness. Just even that example you shared back with me demonstrates your service mentality. It isn't just about advancing what Aoifinn wants. It's about creating something that it also lifts me up and lifts others up. So it's so incredible. And I am curious, being that you made mention of personal brand, which I'm going to go now back into the thinking mind. Um, Describe for me your personal brand going into 2025, and is it different than the one you had a year ago?
I would say the personal brand that I'm bringing in is owning my platform in a way that is unashamed and intentional. Because before, I did not see it was as relevant to have a name attached to it. I thought that the guests, the content would speak for itself. What I would say I'm quite aware of, especially with the recent election and the explosion of podcasts in what's been termed the manosphere. And I didn't even know what this term was before. And I'm clearly not part of the manosphere, but I would like to think that there is something just as interesting that can sit outside the manosphere, that can build following and be powerful and be setting standards and developing norms and having conversation and be a go-to area that is separate from that. And what I see is that a personal brand is key to bring that forward, because increasingly we are looking beyond companies into leaders and who those people are. And maybe that's always been thus, but increasingly a company's fortunes can rise or fall based on the quality of the people at the helm, and having that reliability. Fact, companies can change, markets change, people rarely do. I think we certainly adapt, but we really rarely change in terms of what we bring to the table and our work ethic and what we define as excellence. So I would say that is something that I think I'd like to just bring forward. Is really just essentially, you know, when you're doing graphics on a PowerPoint, you can say bring to front or send to back. This is always there, but I am bringing it to the front now, and I'm not sending it
Mm,
back.
yeah. Is that how you're different from last year? Is that something that you noticed the shift in yourself?
I think so. It's having the confidence to bring it to the front. And because in a way, this is who I am. I'm maybe turning 50 is the effect of that. And being able to lead with that is, I think, something that is as much of a role model as I can be.
Last question. This is a question I often will ask my clients, and I do a personal exercise at the end of it, well, beginning of every year around my vision board, and that is, what do you want to be, do, and have this year? So just imagine it's 12/31/2025. What did you how did you answer that? What do I want to be? What do I want to do? And what do I want to have at the end of the year?
Great question. Not having had a chance to prepare, but why not? This is
Shoot from the hip.
my forte. That's the only place I can shoot from. In terms of what I want to be, I want to be professionally fulfilled. I want to be leading a podcast platform which has video and other content that is making a difference. We have recently tied our impact to the SDGs. There are 5 or 6 SDGs that we can say we contribute to: education, innovation, gender equality, empowerment, poverty alleviation. All of these things come with financial literacy and empowerment, which we stand for. So I want to be at the helm of something that is making an impact that way. What do I want to do? I want to do more creativity. I want to find ways to deliver content that is breaking boundaries. So we've done some live events. I want to do more of that. I want to connect with people in real life. I'd love to create more podcast diary effects, audio diaries, or ways that we can actually fully immerse listeners in the audio experience. I'm a passionate lover of travel and experiences, and I'd like to bring that to bear through a podcast. I've always thought that sounds of places, sounds of voices can immerse. That's why
Mm.
I love the audio form, because I can close my eyes and become immersed and transported to another place. Much easier to do that via audio, I believe, than video. So finding a way to do that with the audio medium is something that I would like to do more of in 2025. And what would I like to have? I'd like to have great conversations. I'd like to have friendships that are only growing because we've managed to connect over and over again. And I'd like to have the validation that comes from that, whether it's through more feedback on the podcast or more impact that it makes.
What a beautiful response to a question that I came up with on the fly for you. Aoifinn, I'm so excited to see what comes for you, for the podcast and the community that you're creating in 2025. And thank you for inviting me to be someone to have a conversation like this with you around. I'm really, really flattered and feel privileged that I got to be in this conversation with you.
Thank you so much, Jeanie. It is an honor to host you and to have your insights. I feel extra special now that I've had access to a little bit of this coaching here live on air.